Hello there, and welcome to the weekly Outside Views magazine on British politics. Due to various strikes, travelers in Great Britain have to be prepared for cancellations and delays before Christmas. At Heathrow, Britain's largest airport, ground staff want to stop working for 72 hours from December 16th, as the union Unite has now announced. The employees of a private service provider are fighting for better pay and working conditions. Heathrow Airport said it was trying to minimize the impact on passengers, though. Also on December 16th and 3 more days before Christmas, the security staff of the train operator Eurostar also wants to go on strike. This connects the British capital with Paris, Brussels, and Amsterdam via the Eurotunnel. The employees of several British railway companies who deny domestic connections also want to stop working on individual days before Christmas. The conflict over higher wages in view of the enormous increase in consumer prices has been going on for months. Ambulance traffic jams in front of emergency departments in the UK are increasing. More than 10,000 ambulances wait at least an hour every week for patients to be taken on. That's what the BBC reported, citing its own evaluation. This means that in mid-November, every eighth ambulance occupation was affected. It is the highest level since records began in 2010. The problems endanger the health of patients enormously, according to the BBC. And the British Health Service NHS has been at the breaking point for years and is chronically underfunded. In December, the workers want to strike for the first time in their history for 2 days to emphasize their demands for higher wages. The government recently announced additional billions for the service, but rejects wage increases as unaffordable. Millions of people in the UK are waiting for routine surgery. But as the BBC analysis shows, there are also significant problems with the ambulances. The aim is for patients with heart attacks or strokes to be picked up by an ambulance within 18 minutes at the latest. But it actually takes more than 60 minutes on average. The core problem is the handover to the emergency rooms. According to the regulations, this should be done within 15 minutes, but in reality it takes a multiple of that time. The ambulance drivers also want to demand higher wages with strikes before Christmas. The European Commission gets more rights to introduce measures against Great Britain in the Brexit dispute. This is intended to help London adhere to negotiated agreements, as the EU announced last week. Possible measures include restrictions on flight as well as trade and investment restrictions. Negotiators from the European Parliament and the EU member states had previously agreed on the authorization. Both Parliament and the member states still have to formally confirm the outcome of the negotiations, but that is in this case just a formality. In concrete terms, the Commission can then issue so-called implementing acts in order to introduce penalties. However, these must always be proportionate and effectively induce the United Kingdom to comply with agreements, according to the communication from the EU member states. Brussels and London have been at loggerheads since Great Britain left the EU. The British government has repeatedly threatened to terminate negotiated agreements unilaterally. At the same time, London is feeling the negative effects of leaving the EU. The British Central Bank, for example, the Bank of England, has acknowledged that Brexit will have far-reaching consequences for the UK, also on the labour market and on inflation. Britain's exit from the EU has reduced trade between the UK and the EU, which in turn has impacted labour, productivity, and prices. It has become more difficult to import goods from the EU to Great Britain as well. This has led to less competition and more pricing power for companies. That probably turned out to be an inflationary. The British economy fears turbulence from a hasty abolition of EU rules, which the United Kingdom initially retained after Brexit. Several business associations and also trade unions warned in a joint letter last week Thursday that a planned law that would expire without replacement a number of rules and EU standards adopted from EU times harbored the risks of serious uncertainty and disruption for companies, employees, and those who protect the environment. The organizations involved included the Institute of Directors as well as the Trade Union Congress. Since Brexit, Great Britain has deviated from EU laws in individual areas such as agriculture or migration, but according to the BBC has also retained thousands of regulations so far. The British short-term Prime Minister Liz Truss, predecessor of incumbent Rishi Sunak, had promised with her government to let all rules still in force from EU times expire by the end of 2023 at the latest, and introduced a law called Retained EU Law Bill into Parliament. Sunak too once announced during the party's internal election campaign that he wanted to abolish EU bureaucracy. The concern of the associations is now that environmental and animal welfare standards, employee rights, protection against discrimination, and many other established principles could be undermined. This could destabilize the economy and even create more bureaucracy. The government is therefore called on to stop the law. A dispute over the construction of the new Chinese embassy in London threatens to further sour relations between Beijing and the United Kingdom. The capital's Tower Hamlets surprisingly rejected a proposal for the building. According to media reports, the Reasonable District Council unanimously rejected the Chinese plans to rebuild the approximately 2-hectare area in central London. Residents in the district had previously spoken out against the major project. Among other things, they had claimed that the new embassy in the area could often result in protests. According to The Guardian, the Chinese embassy complex should actually become the largest representation of a country in Great Britain. The refusal apparently came as a surprise. The responsible architect had recently told CNN that the plans correspond to the development plan for the area and that the building permit would have to be obtained after the authorities had checked it. A member of the responsible district council told CNN that concerns about the safety of residents and tourists and the flow of traffic around the structure were the reason for the rejection. The plans would now be passed to the Mayor of London before a final decision was made. According to The Guardian, residents were relieved about the district decision. According to CNN, the British government could also push through the construction against the district's decision. The former British finance minister said he had struggled with the decision for a long time, but he said he did not want to run in the next general election. And that Prime Minister Sunak is set, we heard. The squad of Conservative MPs in the British Parliament who no longer want to stand in the next election has been expanded to include a prominent representative of the party. Former Finance and Health Minister Sajid Javid, who was also instrumental in the case of then Prime Minister Boris Johnson in the summer, announced on Friday that he no longer wants to run in the next election. I struggled with this decision for a long time but have decided not to compete again. That's what Javid wrote in a letter posted on Twitter. In the summer, he was still in the running for party leadership. The son of a Pakistani bus driver, Javid was Britain's first Muslim Home Secretary and Finance Minister. With his resignation as Health Secretary in the summer, he made a significant contribution to the resignation of then Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Before his political career, Javid was a successful investment banker, so like Sunak. The millionaire was also criticized for his wealth and alleged tax tricks. Tory MPs are expected to indicate by early next week or even this week whether or not they want to run again in the general election, which is expected to take place in 2024. Like Javid, around a dozen Conservative parliamentarians have already announced that they no longer want to do this. and the trend was rising. I don't have the full numbers yet, but must be some. The prospect for many seats are poor as things stand. In the current polls, the Tory party is around 25 percentage points behind Labour after many scandals and multiple changes at the top. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak commented on the withdrawal of his party colleague with disappointment. Sad that my good friend Sajid Javid is retiring from politics, wrote Sunak, concluding with a famous quote from the film, "May the force be with you, Saj." Both politicians are known to be big Star Wars fans. In 2016, a majority of Britons voted in favour of Brexit. Since then, the importance of Great Britain for German trade has decreased, and the uncertainty remains high, and this now has historical consequences. Great Britain is becoming less and less important as a trading partner for us in Germany after Brexit. This year, the United Kingdom will drop out of the top 10 German trading partners for the first time in recent history. This emerges from an analysis by the federal company Germany Trade and Invest, or GTAI, which is available to the German press agency in London. The calendar and seasonally adjusted exchange of goods between January and October grew by 13.7% compared to the same period last year, mainly due to inflation. However, the entire German foreign trade in goods increased by 20.7% in the same period. Most recently, the Czech Republic overtook Great Britain in the ranking of the most important trading partners of Germany. The Confederation of British Industry, the CBI, has significantly lowered its forecast for economic growth in Great Britain for the coming year. Instead of a 1% increase as in the last forecast, the association is now assuming a decline of 0.4% in gross domestic product, or GDP. The recession that the country has slipped into will last until the end of 2023. That's what experts from the Confederation of British Industry said, according to a statement published on Monday. The weak economic activity is based on high inflation. It probably peaked at 11.1% in October, but will still be well above the British Central Bank's target of 2%. This means the pressure on households from this year will continue into 2023 and result in a year-long decline in consumption. That's what the statement said. But even if the economy grows again, the outlook remains bleak because productivity and investment are weak. Michael Lockwood was given a choice by Home Secretary Suella Braverman: resign or be fired. What he's accused of is still not so very clear, but a criminal investigation is underway against him. The head of Britain's police inspectorate has resigned amid allegations of misconduct. The head of the Independent Office for Police Conduct, Michael Lockwood, is being investigated by the police. That's what Interior Minister Suella Braverman told the AFP news agency on Saturday evening. That's why she gave him the choice of resigning or being fired. The Interior Minister did not provide any further information on the allegations at that time. According to The Times, Lockwood's alleged misconduct occurred almost 4 decades ago, when the 63-year-old was in his 20s. Lockwood himself said he was resigning for personal and domestic reasons. And the BBC also reported on the case. And the IOPC was set up in 2018 to deal with complaints about police officers in England and Wales. The British police have recently been criticized for a series of scandals. The kidnapping, rape and murder of Londoner Sarah Everard by a police officer last year caused the most outrage. As a result, calls were made to combat sexism and misogyny within the police forces. British farmers warn of supply problems in view of the enormously increased prices. I fear the country is sleepwalking into more food crises because the future of Britain's fruit and vegetable supply is in trouble. That was said by Minette Betters, president of the National Farmers Union, and she told that to the BBC on Tuesday. Recent shortages on UK supermarket egg shelves, caused in part by a major outbreak of bird flu, may have been just the beginning. Tomatoes, cucumbers and pears could also become scarce because their cultivation consumes a lot of energy. For decades, consumers in Great Britain have been used to getting good quality food with high environmental and animal welfare standards at affordable prices. This is now in danger, as Bet has warned. The association called on the UK government to support farmers and breeders who have been hit hard by increased prices for fertilizer, feed, energy, and fuel. And according to the PA news agency, the Ministry of Agriculture said that food security is guaranteed because it is built on various pillars. In addition to domestic breeding, imports are also relied on. Yeah, but they should think about Brexit. Food prices have risen significantly in the UK. Higher energy, pet food and transport costs drove food inflation to a record 12.4% in November, according to the Retail Association BRC and market research firm Nielsen IQ. And that concludes this week's magazine on British politics. Of course, tomorrow there will be another, and I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.